Strategic Living with Brian Holmes, episode number 13. Welcome, everyone, to the program today. It is so great to have you with us. My name is Brian Holmes, and this is the Strategic Living Podcast. I'm glad you found us. If you've been listening for some time, I'm glad you're back. It's going to be an amazing program today. We're going to be talking about your beliefs and how your belief systems hold the key to your success and your accomplishing that which God's given you to do. I've got a fantastic guest on the program. I've been waiting to conduct this interview and introduce you to this great man for quite a long time. So let's just get ready. Let's get started and let's receive something new today that will challenge us to become all God has called us to be. Well, welcome, my great friends, to the program today. It's a delight to have you with us on the Strategic Living Podcast. And we are all about transforming minds, developing leaders, activating destinies. Our desire here, of course, is just to come alongside of you and to add value to you, somehow encourage you and teach you, train you, mentor you, coach you, just be an encouragement to you so that you really do understand and know in your heart that you can, in fact, become all God's called you and created you to be. You see, we oftentimes live so far beneath our potential, and there's many reasons for that, but most of that has to do with the things that we hold in our hearts to be true. Whether they're true or not, once you believe something, it is true to you. And so today, we're going to continue in this vein we've been talking on for some time now, and we're going to talk about your beliefs, your belief systems, and we're going to talk about how, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. And it is such a joy, you have no idea, for me to introduce to you one of my dearest friends, someone who I consider to be just such a valuable partner and collaborator in life. And this man has really meant a lot to me over the years, and I'll introduce him to you formally in just a moment. But on the program today, it's my pleasure to interview and to have share with you my friend, Dr. Mark Chironna from Orlando, Florida. And I'm going to give you his official bio here so you can have an understanding of really who this man is and what he carries. Because when we get into the conversation in just a few moments, we're not going to have time for all these formalities. So Dr. Mark Chironna is a certified life coach. He is a prolific author of so many books, so many great pieces of material. He is a pastor, a bishop. He is a spiritual leader, and he is really uniquely qualified and gifted to bridge the realms of the intellectual and the spiritual. And let me just kind of give you an idea what I mean by that. We need more people who can build a bridge between the sacred and the secular, the spiritual and the practical. And Mark Chironna is one of those men who has been on the leading edge of that movement for a long time. His frequent media appearances are well received in both faith-based and secular markets because, you see, truth and principles, those things we derive from God's Word, they're not just for Christians. They're not just for those of us who subscribe to some theological bent. They are for everyone. Principles apply to everyone. Dr. Chironna is recognized for his articulate and compelling approach to modern day and very contemporary issues. He's probably best known for his very uncommon ability to foster and release the creativity and the personal power that resides within each individual. So you're going to meet a very authentic man, a very compassionate man, someone who understands purpose and destiny, and his message, his ministry, that which he brings to the marketplace and beyond, has changed and transformed the lives of so many people all over the world. Now, just by way of educational and academic qualifications, let me just tell you how deep this guy is. Dr. Mark holds a bachelor's in music and education, a master's in divinity and theology, a master's degree in psychology, a PhD in theology, and right now is in the process of earning his PhD in psychology. So this guy is the real deal. But beyond all of the accolades, beyond all of the qualifications by human standards. He carries within him an anointing and a grace to speak truth and to bring revelation and impartation. And it is just a joy to have him with us today. So without further ado, let's go right now to my interview with Dr. Mark Chironna. It is an amazing privilege and a great honor of mine today to welcome to the Strategic Living Podcast my friend and a mentor in my life, Dr. Mark Chironna. Dr. Mark is from Orlando, Florida, and has been working with us on a number of levels for, 12 or 13 years now, I believe. We met for the very first time, I believe it was in Beaumont, Texas, of all places, a little hole-in-the-wall kind of a place. And shortly after that, I made a trip over to Orlando with a great friend of ours, Bishop Tudor Bismarck, and we were able to meet at Dr. Mark's ministry there. And our relationship has blossomed into a friendship, a mentorship. I certainly look to him as one of the people that I talk about often who is in my upline, somebody that I garner so much strength, so much knowledge and wisdom from. Man, thank you for taking the time to be on the program today. I know our listeners are going to really enjoy this. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Ray, it's an honor to be with you. And just so you know, the feeling is mutual. Impartation goes both ways. I deeply appreciated your input in my own journey as well. It's changed my life.
Well, thank you so much for that, man. And well, I tell you what, our program here, as you know, Dr. Mark, is about transforming minds, developing leaders, activating destinies, really setting people into motion as it relates to their purpose and their calling in life. And one of my great desires, birthed out of my own experience, is to see people really healed, because I believe there's a lot of well-intentioned people, a lot of people who desire to do great things that are broken on some level. Their belief systems are in some way limited. And my heart and this program is dedicated, frankly, to helping people to become all God has called them to be. And I know that's the same kind of work you do, hence why we've connected on such a deep level. But I want to talk to you today about the mind a little bit. It's a subject we've been talking about here quite a lot. Dr. Mark has I believe it's a master's degree. Is that correct, in psychology?
MA in psychology. Mm-hmm.
And also a doctorate in divinity, if I'm correct about that.
Leadership in theology.
All right. So there you go. So we got a lot of doctors in the house. I'm just a lowly nurse here trying to facilitate what's going on. But man, it's great to have you today. And let's just jump off here and talk about this subject. It has been my experience that most people that I meet have a great desire to do something unique and special with their life. I believe, frankly, it's wired into who we are. We're created in God's image, in His likeness. We are destined to do great things. There is a specific assignment on each person's life. We know these things. Why is it in your mind that people have such a struggle really tapping into that potential? What are you seeing in your work?
Well, at the risk of sounding like every other motivational speaker, the fact is truth, no matter who says it or how often it's said. And buzzwords can oftentimes become so well known that we assume because we hear them, we've dealt with it. But the concept of limiting beliefs is the very reason why we never access and fully actualize the greatness for which God made us.
So how are beliefs formed? Where do we pick these beliefs up? It's not really in our created spirit, man. So how do we pick up these beliefs?
Well, Brian, that's a powerful question. And what most people don't think about is the very nature of belief itself. And because we don't understand the nature of belief, we don't realize how we internally are built to function. So there are different levels of thinking and being, and if we ever want to change our behaviors, we have to address every level. There's that basic level of I live in an environment. Adam was created in the optimal environment in which to achieve his grand design in God and fulfill his potential. However, when he violated the covenant and was banished from paradise, every one of us has struggled with thorny environments and the sweat of our brow. So our environment, our where and our when, have a profound effect. They're part of our belief system because my environment is something that either constrains me or expands me, all depending upon how I see it. And then based on whether I'm constrained or I'm being enlarged is going to determine how I behave, which says to me what I'm going to do there, which I'm telling myself if I'm in a limited environment or I perceive I'm in a limited environment, I'm going to ask myself, well, what do I do in this? And I'm going to probably either come up with some sort of a compensating way to cope, or if I'm in an enlarged environment, I'm going to feel creative enough to be playful and experiment. But if I'm in a limited environment and I'm dealing with limiting beliefs, and the reason why I think more of us are there than are in the other place, and you know as well as I do, we've both talked about the fact that in the world of motivational psychology, we know that most people never achieve the greatness for which they were born. You know, who was it that said, was it Emerson that said most men die with their dreams still in them? Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, most people do wrestle with limiting beliefs, and it's because our behaviors are based on believing that our environments limit us, but then those behaviors are tied to what we believe we're capable of or not capable of, and those are rooted in how come we believe that, which goes back to early life scripts, which all affects our belief in who I am, who we are, our identity. And the fact is, our identity is our destiny. So at every level, whether it's our identity, our beliefs and values, our capabilities, our behaviors, or our environment, I've got to make shifts. The good news is it's like a set of tumblers. You make a shift in one, and the rest will all come into place.
Sure. You know, one of the things that I've observed, and let me just backtrack here, for those that maybe haven't listened to all of the podcasts that we've done here on Strategic Living, back in episode number 1, I gave you a pretty broad spectrum, but yet a real specific snapshot of what my testimony, what my life is. Just an example for you to play off of, Dr. Mark. At 11 years old, tragic things took place in my life, shifted my belief about my self-worth, my value, shifted my belief about even some, social interactions with people. And so at a very early age, this began to follow me. And it, just like truth, untruth builds line upon line, precept on precept, and it just begins to stack on. So now for 22 years of my life, I was carrying these limiting beliefs, these untruths, we call them lies, whatever, however you want to look at these. And they affected every decision, every choice. It affected my behaviors. It formed my habits. And they were destructive, and they were leading me away from the fullness of what God had for me as opposed to towards the fulfillment of destiny. And so in my work, I know you've been doing this so much longer than I have, but in my work, I find so many people who have this pain they're dealing with, and these old memories, these old thoughts, and in some cases they're so suppressed that they're not even fully aware of why they are the way they are. But what are some of the things that you have used, or some of the tools and systems you have seen that work in helping people to begin the process of unlocking those, unraveling those, and uprooting those limiting beliefs?
Great question. First and foremost, one of the things that most of us are not aware of is our conceptual system. We conceive, the way we conceive reality is based on the way we perceive reality.
Okay.
Our percepts determine our concepts. So it's like the guy who perceives that every problem is a nail, and so uses a hammer to solve every problem.
Okay.
And we think in metaphors. We used to want to say, well, metaphors are just the stuff that poets use to invite our imaginations to go somewhere, and rhetoricians use when they're pulpiteering to impress us with all sorts of ways of painting pictures. When in actual fact, empirical psychological studies in the last 5 decades have proven that most of us are not aware of the fact that in everything we do every day, we're automatically operating in metaphors. For example, to hear someone, one of my coaching clients, tell me, my workplace is a battlefield. Wow. Now, just having to unpack that in terms of that person's identity, their values, their capabilities, their behaviors in that environment, it took 12 weeks just to begin to help him understand how that metaphor was determining the outcomes he was getting in life. Mm.
So what I'm hearing you say is that we have filters, we have a grid through which we process opportunities, challenges, relationships, and whatever that filter is based on these beliefs, we're going to perceive that and then consequently turn that, and that becomes our reality concerning that particular matter.
Absolutely. And Peter Senge and would borrow the Thomas Kuhn idea of a paradigm or a mental model, that all of us have these deeply embedded mental models of how the world works. And a mental model is a way to explain my thought process about how things work in the real world. It's a representation internally of the surrounding world. It isn't the real world. It's the world inside, though, that I believe is real. So my perception becomes my reality. So it's a model. It isn't the real thing. So, for example, when you think of how much a spoon helps you to eat or a fork helps you to eat, ultimately a fork, a spoon, they are models of something else. And what they're models of is the hand. So the hand was the original fork and spoon. And then somewhere along the way, a creative imagination discovered we can probably eat more neat and more tidy and less messy if we make a model of the hand that can be put in the hand to serve us. And so it's the same way with our mental models. We have these spoons and forks and all sorts of things inside us that we think are reality, but are models of the reality that's around us. And they affect our intuition, they affect our imagination, they affect our capabilities, they affect our behaviors, they affect our identity. And so learning to recognize that grid and those mental models, which is what those metaphors are built on, layer upon layer, is the key. Unpacking those and bringing those to conscious awareness are the key to transformation.
You know, our mutual friend and colleague, Bishop Tudor Bismarck, many years ago, one of the first things I think I ever heard him teach, actually, in 1996, he did a session on life is lived on levels and experienced in stages. And he talked, of course, about the metaphor of even like school years, how you graduate from one class grade to another class grade, and then eventually from high school into university, and then university into career, or whatever the case may be. And at each stage, there is a test. At each level, there is a test. I find that people they come to these threshold moments, and God has made available to them a new season, a fresh set of circumstances, opportunities that are just mind-blowing. And they come right to the door of that, and then they, in some way, form, or fashion, talk themselves out of it because of, again, limiting beliefs. And it's almost as, and then if they do happen to step into that new room, they sabotage the opportunity because they don't feel like they're worthy, they don't feel like they're capable, they don't deserve it, whatever the case may be. How do we begin to help individuals to get beyond limiting beliefs? How do we coach or mentor folks through the process of identifying, eradicating, and ultimately replacing these destructive limiting beliefs?
It's the one thing that is the most simple observation, but the most complex to understand. Solomon said, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue." Yep. And Jesus said, as well as Solomon, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. we often misquote the verse about the power of the tongue. We say it this way: life and death are in the power of the tongue. But that's not the order in which Solomon expressed it. He said death and life. And he said that because after careful observation with great divine wisdom of human nature, he was able to observe, evaluate, and summarize that we are more prone to speak death before we speak life, not realizing that, James, the brother of Jesus, says the tongue is like the rudder of the ship. And so the way to help people overcome their limiting beliefs is we've got to get them in touch with their self-talk.
Okay.
Because embedded in their self-talk, so let's embedded in their self-talk are all the metaphors that are going to give you the clue to what those operators are deep inside their unconscious. Those, what I call them, the embedded reporters. It's not been until the last three since the Gulf War, where we had what they call embedded reporters. Those guys that actually were in the SUVs where the RPGs were, they were actually in real time. There were guys that were on the front lines before, but never embedded with an actual troop in the middle of major battles. And I think inside we have these embedded reporters, these parts of our personality that are always reporting to us this is going on. So, for example, my client that said his workplace was a battlefield. So everything in his metaphors revealed to me that he had a posture of war in every area of his life. And it wasn't just his workplace. It was in his marriage. It was in all his relationships. So he would look at arguments as and disagreements as, she attacked every weakness in my argument. I demolished everything he tried to say to me when he argued with me at the office. I've never won an argument with my boss. All war, all metaphors that were limiting his ability to connect at deeper, more interpersonal levels with all the people that really mattered most in his life, and it was sabotaging his success.
Now, I'm going to go back a ways. One of the books that I read of yours, gosh, it might have been 10 years ago, I'm not sure, but Beyond a Shadow of a Doubt. You talked a lot about some of these principles and how this doubt, this self-doubt, the self-talk, which reveals the self-doubt and the unbelief, if you will, those things really are the critters that are literally locking us in place, holding us back from realizing our dreams. And I know,
absolutely,
I know that you are a person who has studied dreams, and this awakening the dreamer within you concept is something that is near and dear to my heart, because I believe there are so many people that have dormant dreams that are just waiting to be awakened. Talk a little bit, if you will, about the importance of being a dreamer and how we go about awakening these dreams.
Wow, it's a great question. And again, I think it goes back to our culture has been conditioned to have a rational, logical, reasonable way of approaching life. So we want blueprints. And listen, blueprints are fine. However, if you look at the order of creation, long before there were fruit-bearing trees, there had to be a blue sky over them. And I think we need to begin to look back to a moment in time when we lived under a blue sky. Because if you're looking for a blueprint before you live under a blue sky, the best you're going to do is come up with rehashed principles and other people's methods of getting success, instead of dreaming under an open heaven and learning to be childlike in your faith, to allow your imagination to go places that it only went when you heard your mother or father read you a bedtime story that started with Once Upon a Time. And I think the greatest Once Upon a Time is Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God. And I think all of us need to come back to an in the beginning God moment where we come under this blue sky. The heavens were created first. And heaven is God's home. Walter Wink says that heaven is the home of the possibles. So the awakening of the dream is, to me, this place where I give myself permission to come back to this blue sky thinking that logical, rational, strategic thinkers, the Six Sigma whole movement in the corporate world is built on hope is not a strategy. Well, I know hope is not a strategy, but it's a very real, affective, effective way to awaken my ability to come up with a strategy. Because without hope, I have nothing to desire or to expect. Because hope is desire married to expectation, which means I can't come up, and I listen, I'm not about to go after the brainchild of the guys that produce Six Sigma, the strategy. They're brilliant. And I know what they're saying when they say hope is not a strategy. But what we're missing is the affective side. I need to be a dreamer first. I need to understand that desire, there's got to be a want to. And then there's got to be a want to that's hooked up to an expectation that it not only there's a want to, but there's a will to, that it can actually happen. And then that I'll get a chance to. So I think that's the foundation. The blue sky precedes the blueprint.
Wow. The blue sky idea, am I understanding that to be juxtaposition to a cloudy, dark sky, things that have accumulated over time, or is it a different metaphor you're trying to draw there?
Absolutely. Because you know as well that, listen, I don't know, I don't have to tell you, your whole breaking the ties that bind is all about the unfinished business in people's lives that clouds their thinking, clouds their vision, clouds their decision-making, clouds their ability to relate and connect. So absolutely, a cloudless sky. Now listen, there are some clouds that are wonderful because they send rain.
Yes.
But the constant oppressive storm clouds that are contrary, blowing winds contrary to where we're supposed to be, that's not the intention of the God who designed us for greatness. That is a sinister intention, and it's meant to diminish us instead of deliver us.
So would you agree then that maybe the baseline of the process for each of us is to seek out processes of healing and processes of discovery, to not so much just try to scientifically determine what's our limiting beliefs, but to begin to really research and look at and discover what's in there, and what moments in my life did I take a right turn when I should have taken a left turn, and just begin to unpack that. What are the processes you see taking place?
Yeah, I think, and I think it goes back to start paying attention to what you say when you talk to yourself. We are only conscious of 30% of our self-talk.
Oh, wow.
The other 70% we're unconscious of, and it's mostly negative. However, I can say, listen, we just killed a rattlesnake. We live by a lake, so we've got water moccasins, rattlesnakes, copperheads. We've got them all. And we just killed a rattlesnake recently at our back door. Now, I could say all I want, that as long as I didn't open that door, I would have never known the rattlesnake was there. However, the rattlesnake was there, whether I opened the door or not.
Yes.
And I think the world of positive psychology, Dr. Martin Seligman, and the world of cognitive behavioral therapy, and the great work of Dr. Ellis and Dr. Beck and all the others that talked about, cognitive, changing your beliefs, changes your behavior and your mood. If 70% of my self-talk is negative and goes undetected, does that mean I am unaffected by it? And the answer is no, because I'm telling myself things that are self-sabotaging, but I'm not conscious of them because I'm not paying attention to my internal dialogue. But it's having an effect whether I want it to or not. I'm reaping what I'm allowing to be sown into my life, even if I'm not conscious.
I mentioned in a previous podcast that in my estimation, that's why Paul used this metaphor, gird up the loins of your mind. Why did he use that term?
Yeah.
Because that's the reproductive region. These negative thoughts, beliefs, whether detected or not, are constantly reproducing offspring. And,
absolutely.
And that family's growing in our minds and our hearts. And as you've already brought out so adequately here, that's limiting our forward progress. It's keeping us from moving into the greatness that we were designed to experience. Let's just begin to wrap this, and I want to put a bow on it here by asking a little bit of a loaded question. Not everybody that I reach out to is a Christian or a evangelical believer, and certainly I know that the world that you move in and out of all those worlds as well. But one of the things that's very close to my heart is I've traveled an average of about 70 to 90 days per year for the last 10, 11, 12 years. Actually, for the last 17 years. And I've been in hundreds, maybe thousands of churches and ministry events and conferences. And it's pretty much the same everywhere I go. And that is that people are saved. People do have a relationship with God, and theoretically they know God. Yet they've not crossed over into what you and I would refer to as a kingdom life, a prosperous life. They're not tapping into their potential. And in many cases, it's because of a brokenness, because of these limiting beliefs we're talking about. And how do we begin? This is the loaded question. How do we begin bridging the gap between classical theology and religion and church as we know it, and helping individuals to really deal with these soulish issues? Because the soulish issues go far beyond soul ties. That's one factor, but soul ties is one element. But the beliefs are held there, the memories, the wounds, the hurts, the suppositions, they're all held there, the emotions, the feelings. How do we begin to bridge the gap practically to help people deal with limiting beliefs who really desire to stay in a biblical mode?
Wow,
that's a loaded question. That's a loaded question.
It's a great question. I think let me answer it on two levels. The first thing that I was reminded of was when I was in high school. Mao Zedong was the major figure in Asia that was going to change the shape of the nation. And he vowed, if you give me your children for the first 5 years of their life, I will have them for their whole life. Mm-hmm. And the scripture, which is, it really is a biblical principle, train up a child.
Sure it is.
In the way he should go. And when he's old, he won't depart from it. So at a primary level, most of what we're talking about has its roots in our formative years. And because we live in a culture that values logic and rationale, we don't realize how much we lose by the time we're 7 of what it means to be childlike. And there have been numerous studies done in developmental psychology as it relates to imagination and creativity, and how in the Western world we kill it by the time a child is 7 because of the way we're training them. So we are expert, I agree, in our theology in the West, but we are Christian atheists because our experience of God is null and void. What we have is a relationship with a system of beliefs about God without practicing the real presence of God. So we've learned how to be adult in our theology, but we forgot that Jesus said when it comes to faith and the kingdom, except you become as a little child, you can't even enter into it. And so it's one thing to be adult in our theology. We need to be childlike in our faith and trust in Jesus. It begins by becoming childlike all over again and letting the child of God that we are begin to find those imaginative, creative, and I even want to use Len Sweet's word, playful ways of relating to God the Father. And we've lost that, and we've fulfilled, come unto me, all you who are weary and heavy laden. And when you look carefully in Matthew 11 at the weary and heavy laden, it's the people that he says God's hidden things from the wise and the intelligent and revealed it to babes. And it was pleasing in God's sight. So when we get too smart for our own good, we don't know what to do with our emotional issues, our dashed hopes and dreams that got killed somewhere early in childhood, and our hunger for the thing that theology can't give us and only God can give us. Jesus said, you search the scriptures because you think that in them you find eternal life, but you refuse to come to me. And so, Brian, I think that the healing of the soul is essential to this childlikeness. When Jesus appeared at the Sea of Galilee, when Simon Peter decided he was going to go back and be a fisherman, and he took 6 of his buddies with him, and they fished all night and caught nothing, just like when Jesus first met him in Luke 5. When Jesus is there on the beach making breakfast, here's the resurrected Savior who lowers himself to the point where he's making breakfast for these guys who still doubt that he's alive, even though he's appeared to them before. And they don't even recognize him. But his words to them, and it's so powerful to me. He doesn't call them apostles, almighty men of God. He says, children, have you any meat? And, he is, Isaiah says, he's the everlasting Father of the new race. That's not to equate him with God the Father. He is God the Son. But in terms of his work, he is the everlasting Father, the progenitor of the new creation race. And so he's inviting them to be children and to be playful. They've taken themselves way too seriously, and they've worked really hard, and they've forgotten how to play. And he is inviting them to play all over again.
Fantastic.
We've forgotten how to do that. Anyway.
Well, I tell you, we could talk all day, and we will definitely pick this back up again sooner rather than later. But I want to just say this as we close it out. We have a great opportunity ahead of us because people in our nation, where you and I live, in the U.S., and nations all over the world, and by the way, we've received emails and voicemails from literally all over the world since we've released this podcast. And people are hungry. People are hungry for a better life. They know intuitively that there's something more for them. And I believe we're onto something here, and our commitment is to continue to bring a message, not just of hope, because hope deferred makes the heart sick. People have heard hope, 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 and they've not found a practical way to tap into that. And I want to bring just messages like this, people like Mark Chironna, to our audiences so we can continue the work of unlocking people from places of destitution and hopelessness and bring them to a place of success and prosperity and fulfillment and just destiny being revealed in their lives. So I want to say to you on behalf of our audience, man, thank you. Thank you for taking time. And it's just I'm so honored that you would do this for us and with us, and just appreciate so much your relationship. Any closing thoughts you want to add?
No, I'm just delighted and honored to spend the time with you. And what I'm looking forward to, Brian, is for all of your friends that are listening, that you and I are going to be doing some stuff together that we've been talking about, and just to be able to take some of the things we're talking about and give people the tools to become the people that fulfill the dreams that God has intended them to fulfill. That's exciting.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. We're not going to say too much about it here, but just know this. Dr. Mark Chironna and myself, we've been praying about this, discussing this, and we're really working toward bringing some opportunities to you and to our friends all over the world to come together on occasions and do some intensive work together so that we can be literally, in a quantum sense, moved forward in just a matter of days and moments. So I'm looking forward to that as well. MarkChironna.com is a website you need to write down. This will be linked in our show notes, of course. And Dr. Mark, is there any particular books or projects you're working on now you want our audience to know about?
You know what, Brian? I've got a number of new books that are out, but I would, based on what we talked about today, I would encourage them to go back and read Stepping into Greatness and Beyond the Shadow of Doubt. Both of those are part of the series of books I did on this. And then the newest one is Obtaining a Harvest from Your Seed of Dreams, which covers how to, a number of issues in terms of belief systems and the soil of our hearts, everything we've talked about. And so they can certainly, that is, whenever else they find there that speaks to them and resonates with them, that'd be great. I think those three, though, would be a great place to start.
We will link to markchironna.com in our website, and I will also provide a description and some links to these three particular books in the show notes. So if you're listening out there, be sure to check that out. Dr. Mark Chironna, thank you for being with us, man. We love you, care for you deeply, and just God bless all of your work, and we wish you the very best, man.
Thanks, bro. I love you much, man.
Well, I want to encourage you to subscribe to our weekly updates at brianholmes.com, and we will keep in touch with you by email once a week, sending you out the podcast, the blog post, the Monday Mastery videos, anything that we've offered up that week. We want to make sure that you're informed about that. Also, I'd like to encourage you to subscribe to our podcast via iTunes, Stitcher, Zune, whatever services you use to pull down your weekly podcast. Make sure you subscribe. That helps us keep in contact with you as well. I want to ask you a favor. If this podcast is a benefit to you, if it's something that is blessing you, helping you in your journey, I want to ask you to share this with your friends, with your associates, with your coworkers, people that you love and interface with on a day-to-day basis, whether that's on Facebook, on Twitter, LinkedIn, Google+, Pinterest, wherever it is you engage people, not only face-to-face, but in social media. Would you share the Strategic Living Podcast with someone? Let them know about brianholmes.com and what we're offering there. I would be so grateful if you would do that. Hey, leave your comments about this post or anything else you might want to talk about on our website. We'd love to dialogue with you and engage with you in conversation. Well, I trust that something that we've shared today has challenged you to pursue all that God has for you. As Dr. Mark and I talked about, we want to see you healed. We want to see your mind transformed, your spirit renewed. We really want to see you activated and fully engaged and involved in what God's given you to do by way of purpose and destiny. Hey, we love you. We care about you. We really believe in you. And I believe with all of my heart that great things are just ahead in your life. Well, until next time, remember this: you're made in His image, designed for a purpose, and you are destined for greatness. God bless you. We love you. Until next time, we'll see you very soon.